Hello and welcome to another episode of How Good Were They, the podcast where we look at some of football's greatest players and teams and ask the question, how good were they? Today we're looking at a World Cup winning side. A side that we've seen grown up, the history of it constantly repeated again and again and again. It is, of course, England 1966, the World Cup winning side under Sir Alf Ramsey. A side we know one of your earliest memories of watching sport as a kid or looking at books as a kid, especially in this country, is Bobby Moore lifting the Jules Rimet trophy.
Yeah. You can't knock the side in terms of the impact they had on British sporting history. And you say British, not just English. English, obviously, but British sporting history. It was a massive, massive moment. For a long time, the home nations had rejected international football, rejected integrating on the world stage, and then finally they won it in '66, and it's a really, really significantly important moment. But I want to look at today, how good were their side? Were they really as good as some people would remember them?
Yeah, it's a really interesting point to make because we're always you're told, aren't you, growing up in the United Kingdom, that this was a great team, that they're amazing. But are they regarded as that good abroad? Are they regarded as one of the greatest teams ever, or are they just something more ingrained in, especially English society? And maybe why you're British. We are, of course, Welsh. Just put this disclaimer out there right now. Gareth and I are Welsh. I try and approach this with as impartial as we can.
I think the historians in us mean that we can't ignore how important this moment was. I think, just watching this game again in the lead up to this and seeing the British flags that fill Wembley.
It is crazy. There's no English flags at all, is there?
We went to Swansea University and a great sports historian there, Martin Johns, talking really clearly about the importance of this as a British event, and it was. There will have been, of course, there will have been Scots and English in some parts of England, and definitely Welsh and Irish people who would have gone and off for me. But on the whole, we're talking about a national event here that was broadcast. One of the first World Cups that's really broadcast so widely, isn't it?
Well, yeah,
you stood on English soil.
It was hosted in England,
won by England.
Where the football coming home, I guess. Obviously it comes to the songs later, but it's all linked to this, isn't it? You wouldn't have seen much football on TV back then. You might have seen the match of the day, but you wouldn't have seen much other than England playing. So you'd naturally maybe support them, even though that might not be the best thing to say as a Welsh person. But I think it's probably true.
And an attitude, I think, for sure, will have been they were our representative on the world stage, whoever that was, and that was the way it went. Scotland missed out on a World Cup back in 1950, one of the first World Cups.
They withdrew, didn't they? Yeah,
and they withdrew because they didn't win the British Home Nations Championships. It was that sense of British fair play that whoever won the British Home Nations Championship should represent Britain, and England win it that year. Even though Scotland qualify and are invited and welcome to go, and they don't go to the World Cup because of it. And I think there was still an attitude even into the 60s of these are the people who are doing it for the whole of the British Isles.
I do think Scotland was a little bit different. I do think they were generally not as fussed on England winning it.
But possibly so.
I think the papers afterwards weren't as much into let's celebrate this. It was a bit more
England win.
Yeah. But we're not talking about Wales and Scotland here, we're talking about England. So let's move on. So can you tell me some of the key players in that 66 team?
Yeah, I think, their names are etched in football and legacy, and when you hear their names you go, wow, what a player. And again, it's probably one that people have only seen their highlights of, but people like Bobby Moore, who obviously lifts it, the famous number 6, and you can see his shirt in the Manchester, the National Football Museum. We saw that version of it. Bobby Charlton, who had a quality World Cup.
He was class. He was so good.
Yeah. Geoff Hurst, obviously goal scorer in the final, hat-trick.
Found in the quarter-final as well.
Yeah, and then you've got the likes of Nobby Stiles, who was a bit of a character.
Nobby dancing. Yeah.
Gordon Banks. And then, other characters that score goals, important goals, people like Martin Peters, and Hunt, and just a general, names that are etched into football and folklore, really, in the country. A lot of them come from West Ham as well, aren't they? West Ham
spine, and I think that causes some of the debate. So let's look. So this is the team. start the 11. Banks and goals. Ray Wilson left back. Bobby Moore and Jack Charlton centre backs. Cohen right back. Then Nobby Stiles. Then Peters and Alan Ball. Bobby Charlton, Hurst and Hunt. England under Alf Ramsey famously played the 4-4-2. As later used by Mike Bassett, England manager, as well in the film.
And all good proper football men as well.
All good proper football men. 4-4-2. You add the expletive in if you want. Famously, this team was known as the Wingless Wonders. They didn't have, before it was outside four, outside right, outside left. They didn't use wingers. It was more of a 4-4-2 diamond. Styles at the base.
Very modern.
Yeah, Peters and Ball, kind of centre mids with the freedom to go to the left and right. Charlton as the attacking mid, Hurst at the front, and then I think fullbacks offered a bit more width. So quite a revolutionary, I think, setup at the time. Obviously, it worked. England win the World Cup. They beat West Germany in the final, of course. Young Beckenbauer playing in midfield in that game. Let's go through England's run to the final. You want to hear that? Opening game, Uruguay 0-0. Goalless draw would have been one of the biggest anticlimaxes ever for English football. Surely your own World Cup.
Hosted on English soil.
Uruguay, a team who's won 2 World Cups for that point. Don't forget, but weren't the team they were back then. 0-0, a damp squib of a game, and I think at the time it was regarded in papers so that's not what we expected, especially being goalless. Then they go and beat Mexico 2-0 and France 2-0 to qualify before beating Argentina in a, as always, in the England-Argentina game, a controversial match against Argentina with feisty red cards, refusal to swap shirts into the game. Then they beat Eusebio's Portugal 2-1 in the semi-finals, famously goals from Bobby Charlton, and then of course the final 4-2 West Germany. If you've not listened to this podcast before, watch this podcast, I like to throw 3 curveballs at Gareth throughout the show, where we maybe reassess or challenge the narratives we've been told all our lives. Are you ready for the first one?
Yeah, I'm interested for this. For this side, such an iconic side in British folklore. Let's hear what you've got.
Okay, so first one. This is a big one. Would VAR change the result?
Well, yes, fundamentally, yeah.
Fundamentally, absolutely.
It wouldn't have stood in the same way. That third goal.
Yeah.
Yeah, goal in inverted commas.
Yeah.
Is really, really obvious that it doesn't cross the line.
Yeah, you watch the footage and it pauses and it's just nowhere near across the line. It's on the line, isn't it?
As we say, the whole ball, whole line. And now we've obviously got goal line technology. We don't even need VAR, just goal line technology to tell you. And that little vibration in the refs watch, and we would know that it's not, much different to Frank Lampard's goal in the 2010 World Cup. They really crossed the line, and that one wasn't given
against Germany.
Yeah, and I think at the time it was talked about as payback or whatever.
It was
in the papers and the tabloids. But it wasn't a goal. However, VAR didn't exist in football until the 2018 World Cup, and then really domestically until 3-4 years ago. So really, I think you can talk about all you want, but you can also talk about that through every game that's ever taken place in football history too.
And of course, it's famously the Russian linesman gives it all these. Sharach from Azerbaijan, I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you know the stadium, one of the national stadiums in Azerbaijan, is named after the linesman?
Why?
I don't know. Just must be an absolute hero in Azerbaijan.
Referee to World Cup.
Linesman, yeah. So, you watch the footage back, don't you? It means a good terse touch, it's a good strike off the bar, bounces on the line. I saw Sky Sports years ago, didn't they? We've got modern technology. We're going to do it, and it was over the line, conveniently. But we watched it back, didn't we, just then, and it bounces on the line and out. I think the time Hunt turns around and celebrates straight away for Hurst, and it gets given. And even the final goal, if we want to be really picky, there's people on the pitch.
Stop the play.
The game should be stopped. But, the game carries on, and it's a really good finish. So they do win 4-2 at the end of the day, don't they?
Yeah. And it's an iconic moment, isn't it? There's some of the crowd on the pitch. They think it's all over. It is now.
It is now. Yeah.
Lend itself to one of the greatest bits of commentary as well. So, it is definitely something that if VAR was there on the day, that goal wouldn't have been given, and therefore what happens? It goes to extra time.
Yeah.
Penalties maybe, or
it's got to be one of the best. Would it be penalty? No, 1970. I think the first penalty.
Would there have been a replay?
Oh, that's a really good question. You know what? I think it might have been a replay.
God, imagine a World Cup final replay.
Yeah. So the final itself is quite, it's a really good game. West Germany opened the lead through Haller. Hurst equalises. Peter scores. You think England are going to win it. And then right at the end of the game, Wolfgang Weber scores at 89th minute to equalise. That must have been crushing at the time for the fans watching that game.
Yeah, imagine it. Now we've watched England in finals with slightly different eyes in recent years, and there is a tension there. There's a tension there that in those finals that we watched, the desperation of England not hanging on, not winning. And they played very, very well in some of those games that we saw them go with Southgate lately. But it's always hard in football, isn't it? Clinging on to a result, any game, any league game, any cup game, World Cup final, we clinging on to that, and then to concede. Oh, it must have been totally flattening for that crowd.
So yeah, fair play to get back up again and win it. Okay, curveball 2. The lack of sustained dominance. 62 World Cup. I don't think they do particularly great. Maybe they get out of the groups to in the Chile World Cup. I'm not sure. 1970, of course, then they play West Germany again.
Yeah.
In the quarters, but they go 2-0 up. I think he makes it. Does he take Charlton off? Ramsey, I think he does. Doesn't he? Rest him for semis. West Germany come back, and win 3-2.
And I think it's widely regarded that side, perhaps on paper, a better side
than 66. Yeah, I have heard that before.
Yeah, I think Ramsey himself may have said that was was a better side, and it is interesting, isn't it? Because there is no follow up, and it's really hard to do. But we're also talking at a time where Brazil win 3 out of 4 World Cups.
Yeah, Brazil. 1970 Brazilian team. Would England really? I mean, they lost it. They lose them in the group that they 1-0 in that famous game with the bank save and the more tackle.
Yeah.
Which is just funny, isn't it? How what we are told as kids about that game is, that game is so famous for the bank save and the bowling more tackle. You don't get told England actually lose that game.
Yeah.
To Zinho's goal, do you? It's all about the English players and what they did.
Yeah.
But no, it's I think there is definitely a lack of dominance. It is kind of just on its own, isn't it? Yeah. Brazil, England, Brazil.
But in some ways, that's quite impressive too. I mean, Brazil more fall out of that World Cup in England.
Yeah.
Themselves. But it may well have been, Portugal. I know Eusebio led Portugal, who had a fantastic World Cup.
Yeah.
That could have challenged. It could have been another win for West Germany, who won it 12 years earlier in 1954, and then getting back on top of it again. But fair play, England did it. And it seems to be quite a spell in football, particularly in the World Cup, of a home nation going far, isn't it? It is just a thing that happens in World Cups. Besides winning it on home soil, or if not winning it, getting to the latter stages of a competition. Whether that's the home crowd helping you through, whether that's just a familiarity and a lack of travel, or whatever it may be. But, England do win that World Cup. As much as some people may want it, you can't take that away from them.
No. Okay, right. And curveball 3, would they cope in the modern game? So, back then there's a slower tempo, physical game, little rotation. Would they survive in today's, get the athletes, the tactics, the systems? Can greatness really only be judged if it's cross era and you can,
I think we've said previously when we considered someone like John Charles that is a player who you could absolutely see doing it today. And I think probably Charlton is someone that you could see doing it today. He's clearly a very, very talented footballer. Good finishes. He is someone who would easily cross an era. Whenever you do that comparing thing, I always find it difficult And obviously we like to do it. And that's the whole thing of what we do here and with the Football History Boys. But I think we always got to say you've got to give them modern technology and modern skill and a like
lay
the
off
ball.
lay off the cigarettes at half time.
Exactly that. Modern fitness coaching, modern looking after their bodies, modern
Yeah, you're right.
technology. And it's got to be those things, the boots of today and everything like that, the kits of today. And so some of them wouldn't be probably, but some of them certainly would. And someone like Charlton and Bobby Moore, I think absolutely would do a fair shout. And
yeah, when we've watched the footage of those two, they are outstanding.
yeah.
They're really good footballers. Okay. Interesting curveballs there then. Maybe some good things to think about. Okay, let's think about some quotes from others. Okay, Franz Beckenbauer, he said they played with a maturity that was rare. Okay, yeah, not bad. Franz Beckenbauer, a young Franz Beckenbauer.
Yeah.
Sir Alex Ferguson is a quote here about Bobby Charlton. It says the best English player he ever saw, which I think a lot of people would, replicate those words.
Yeah.
And Pele. Pele, he's got another quote about England. He says, England had the best team in that tournament, which is a big thing from him because he got kind of booted out, didn't he? Kicked out of it by aggressive tackles. Pele's Brazil in that World Cup, and they go out in the groups, don't they? You hear nothing about the Brazilian team.
This is the Brazilian team that have won the last 2 World Cups.
And win the one after as well.
Yeah.
But Pele is kind of, heavy challenges, gets injured, and he's out of it, isn't he? And that's a big loss for that World Cup. It's a good moment to the North Korea, beating Italy and almost getting to semis themselves. But yeah, the Brazilian story is maybe one that is a bit forgotten about in that World Cup.
Do you think it was just because Pele was so old, really, and so involved in football that he's got a quote on every single?
I think maybe. Name a player, I bet is a quote about Pele.
Someone always shoved a microphone underneath him. Or a journalist is always there. I suppose if you were having dinner with Pele, it'd be weird if you didn't ask him about football. And he probably had enough dinners with enough people that he would have got around.
Be interesting to hear from some Brazilians. How is that World Cup remembered in Brazil? Because I bet it must be their worst ever, surely.
Yeah, and that is maybe another sort of curveball that people can chuck at England. That some of those teams didn't play their best football, but we saw that Portugal were quality in that. I think it was their World Cup debut, wasn't it? Portugal, and they were superb with Eusebio. And West Germany are always, even today, quality at World Cups. A German side at a World Cup is one to be feared, and I think that's where we can't take it away from that England side. And I think the myth and the legacy behind this England side is probably pretty fair in that way. I remember when we looked into it that there was even celebrations in Cardiff for this England side doing it. Because it was like, we've done it at last. We rejected the World Cup. We went in 1950. England dumped out, embarrassed in 1950, and don't do a lot elsewhere. Wales do quite well in 58, but finally get over the line in 66. Much like a couple of years later, then when 67 when the Scottish side Celtic win the European Cup, 68 when Man United win the European Cup, first English side to do it. It's a little bit of a spell of okay, we can do this, because I think there'd been a period of time where English sides, internationally and domestically, just seemed like they couldn't do it. So it's definitely important. I think a legacy is a big part of it. When we consider how good a side were, we can look at the individual players, but I think you've also got to look at the legacy of the side. Yeah,
you got to think that Britain or England in that time was the kind of the centre of the world. I mean, the 60s, the swinging 60s, that was all the coolness, Beatlemania, the music that came from the United Kingdom. England winning it is all part of that wider 1960s new Britain, isn't it? New identity that's forming in the country, a new pride, really. So amazing victory for England. Some good curveballs there. Shout out to Geoff Hurst as well. He obviously plays the team. Most people thought Jimmy Greaves should have been the starting centre forward for England in that. He was the best forward in England at that point, but Hurst is picked, and Hurst does the job. There's a famous picture at full time in the final, and the bench is all jumping up, celebrating, and you just see Jimmy Greaves not smiling, not happy. You know, maybe it's just the way the camera catches him, but the narrative goes is that Jimmy Greaves was not happy that he wasn't in that team, and he never regarded himself as a World Cup winner as a result, which, you know, seems a bit sour grapes. But
And I presume he may not have got a medal back then either. I'm guessing it was back in the era of, only the players who played got a medal, possibly.
And I think only the players that played got the official photograph as well.
Oh. And, naturally you're going to feel that, aren't you? And now squads are massive. Or is it 25, 26 go to a tournament?
Again, like Liverpool winning Champions League final 2019, you got Ryan Brewster with his medal. Yeah, look at me. Didn't even play a minute.
Yeah. It's a bit, and I get it, or even John Terry's, who didn't play the final, but were obviously key parts of Chelsea's run there. And so I get it from Jimmy Greaves, but, it definitely would have been controversial at the time. Thinking of maybe Harry Kane being dropped for Solanke, possibly, sort of thing in that way. Maybe that level of shock.
Yeah.
Because Greaves was considered a great, wasn't he?
But, they had the West Ham, wasn't it? It was the West Ham connection. Peters, Moore, Hurst. Okay. Let's get some quotes from our listeners then, see what they thought about this England World Cup winning team. Okay, let's hear some quotes from our listeners then about how good this England team was. Do you want to start?
Yeah, so the Three Lions podcast says, it's a hard one really to define with time, rules, player performances, but realistically, they're as good as Spain. On paper, they're behind Brazil, Italy, Germany, Argentina, France, and Uruguay.
That's interesting. That's so we asked him where they would rate England in terms of the all-time World Cup winning teams.
Winners, yeah.
And this is the Three Lions podcast. This is all about England football, and he says they're probably behind most of those teams.
Yeah.
Interesting, he says they're as good as Spain, because I'd have Spain right up there.
For that dominance,
Yeah, I'd have Spain one of the best. Amos Parr says this is a much-watched film on the topic, so he's got a picture of the 66 official film. Made shortly after the World Cup, it spends a lot of time mentioning early World Cups, which it seems to think were much better. A film of a golden age was harched back to an even better, even more golden age. So he's trying to say that even though it's about 66 World Cup, they almost go on about the early World Cups as more impressive.
Nice.
Quite interesting thought. Okay.
Alex Horsburgh, who's written for us plenty of times on our website and is Scottish. Bobby Charlton famously said the 1970 World Cup side largely held up as was better than the 66 one, which is what we mentioned earlier. But he said that it wasn't better because they didn't actually win it. 66 did do it.
Yeah.
They got themselves over the line. Some outstanding individuals in the 66 side, but probably mid-table in the list of World Cup winners, which is similar to what we've heard.
That's fair enough. Okay, Unpained Britain, please, says, home advantage, of course. Brazil brutally kicked out of the tournament, played a team England had never lost to in the final. Portugal were the toughest team England had to play, but overall, the team was brilliantly managed by Ramsey and never close to that peak again. Okay.
Old Pompey Picks says not at the top for him.
To be fair. Michael Salter, a few really outstanding players, Moore, Banks, Charlton, a few very good ones, Hurst, Ball, Peters, and pretty few average ones as well. Not the worst World Cup winning side, but a long way from the very best ones.
A lovely one here from Headley talking about exactly what we've been mentioning, that impact. It was the impact. Families gathered around the black and white TVs as they moved further and further on. I have clear memories of an elderly aunt yelling, "Kick it out, you fool," at Bobby Charlton during a game in the Portugal semi-final. The players were all relatable and approachable. And I suppose that makes sense. They were Londoners. They were people that you could get behind. And even my dad, again, growing up in Wales, born in 1960, so he was 6. One of his earliest memories is gathering around to watch England win.
Yeah, nice, yeah. Okay. And finally, Dell says they're on the World Cup, so they're amongst the best. No debate needed.
Fair point.
Cheers, Dell. Right, okay. Let's go on to our final bit then, where we rank the team, where we say where we think they should be placed. Okay, so first question, World Cup winners, where do they go?
That's a really tricky one, isn't it? To rank the 24, there are certainly better sides. You would say, obviously, Brazil, 1970 being an easy one. You'd possibly say Argentina's 86 side.
West Germany 74.
Memorable. Yeah, West Germany 74, really memorable side. But they were equally a side that, performed well. did well, had good players in it. Someone like a Charlton, who then goes on to win the European Cup 2 years later. I think they're a decent side. I think they're amongst them. You know, if we say maybe exclude the pre-war ones, because football was very different.
It's a double winning back-to-back Italian team now, though.
Yeah. Well, that's where it's tricky, isn't it? Because again, you're comparing even across eras.
Legacy.
So we say today it's hard to compare back to 66. Well, 66 is hard to compare back in some
38,
38 and 34. You know, there are sort of one-off victories that, like Uruguay's win, perhaps in 50, that is considered a total shock.
Let's keep naming better teams to win the World Cup before we stop. Right, I'll go first. Brazil 70.
Yeah, so then I would take West Germany 74.
Argentina 86.
This is where it gets into subjectivity, but I think I'd probably then I would put the Spain 2010 side there because of the legacy.
France 98.
Yeah, definitely. It's hard. Do you put them back to back? I think you can quite comfortably say Brazil 62 there.
Brazil 58.
Yeah, so I think you take those three Brazil sides, and then you start going.
Yeah, I go Italy.
Similar.
Italy 82.
Yeah, obviously a very popular side.
But I think they're kind of around there.
West Germany 90, people, you know, say okay, but not
Brazil
phenomenal.
94.
Brazil, okay, not phenomenal.
2002 on paper, didn't play nice football.
2006, memorable, but not, you know, that Italian side really.
Yeah. Germany 2014, you know, they're pretty good. I'd maybe have them above.
Because they do over Brazil quite so impressive.
France 2018.
2022 side of Argentina, not really. So I think you can put them as a middle of the tier, which is what someone else said there. Yeah. You know, I think, you know, Alex Horsburgh said middle of the table. And I think I agree there's definitely better World Cup sides to them. But they're not a bad World Cup side, definitely.
No, and they are, you know, iconic in the modern history of Britain.
Yeah, and every World Cup side, even those that don't, and we've talked about, you know, on our Charles episode, how impactful 58 was for Wales. You cannot exclude how important this was. We were singing the Three Lions song before we started recording and saying how iconic it was. Imagine England didn't win that World Cup in 66. I mean, what would they sing? What would they...
That's a really good what-if moment, isn't it? Yeah. What if the goal hadn't been given?
Yeah.
What if Germany had won that
Germany win on English soil and, you know, not that long, live in memory.
21 years after the end of the Second World War. A lot of people in the crowd would have fought
and lost people in that First and Second World War. You know, people who experienced both wars. There definitely would have been that feeling. You know, Germany had won in 54. If they come and win a second World Cup here, it could have been a sort of proper game changing moment.
Right. Final verdict then. Were they great?
I think they were very good.
Okay. Yes, historically great, but not timelessly dominant.
I think significance and historical importance isn't always measured in possibly talent on the field. I think it's wider.
Okay, right. If you enjoy this podcast, please consider leaving a 5-star review. Comment below which kind of teams, players you want us to look at in the future. Maybe managers. That'd be a nice one to look at as well. Yeah. You can follow us on Twitter at TFHPS, the same handle for our YouTube channel as well. You can also follow us on TikTok and Instagram at The Football History Boys. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can watch this podcast on there as well. Follow us on Spotify. That'd be amazing. And keep sending us lots of comments so we can just discuss these teams. We haven't been able to watch all these teams live ourselves. Yeah. We love talking about them. We love hearing what you guys have seen and heard yourselves as well.
I think it's good giving sides a second viewing or a third or fourth viewing and just considering the impact they had on football. Mm-hmm. And that is something we love doing, isn't it? It is something for us. When I was watching Messi in that final, it wasn't just wanting to see Argentina win it. It was thinking this is going to be huge for 20 years' time and 30 years' time. When Man City won that treble recently, a lot of people are like, Man City winning it. But again, it's like, well, that will be talked about in many years to come. And I think these big moments are great to reassess and talk about not just in a team perspective, but individual players too. So yeah, get in touch.
Well, thank you. Right, thank you so much for listening and watching if you're watching YouTube, and we'll see you again for another one very soon.